The wind howled against the reinforced glass of the obsidian, a sound like a dying animal trapped in the canyon of Denver's skyscrapers. Outside, the blizzard was erasing the city, turning the streets into a blur of white violence and freezing temperatures. Inside, however, the atmosphere was controlled, hermetically sealed in a bubble of amber light, the clinking of crystal and the low, murmuring hum of money. The air smelled of truffle oil, aged mahogany, and the distinct metallic scent of anxiety that always seemed to hover around men who had too much to lose. Sophia wiped a bead of sweat from her temple with the back of her wrist, careful not to smudge the makeup she had applied in the rearview mirror of her rusted sedan 2 hours ago. Her feet were throbbing, a dull, rhythmic pulse of pain that shot up her calves and settled in her lower back. It was a double shift. It was always a double shift. When you have a 4-year-old daughter like Lily, who needs asthma medication that the insurance company decided was elective, you don't feel your feet. You just feel the math, the relentless subtraction of bills from a paycheck that never seemed to add up. She adjusted her grip on the heavy silver tray, balancing 3 plates of Wagyu beef and a bottle of vintage Cabernet that cost more than her car. She took a deep breath, trying to center herself. Just 3 more hours, she told herself. 3 more hours, $60 in tips if I'm lucky, and then I can go home and listen to Lily breathing safely in her sleep. Table 4 was the problem. It had been the problem since 7 p.m. Richard Castellano sat there like a king on a throne that was slightly too small for him. He was a massive man, not just in weight, but in the sheer volume of space he demanded. His suit was Italian, custom fitted to hide the bulk of his midsection, the fabric shimmering under the recessed lighting. On his left wrist sat a gold Patek Philippe, a timepiece worth a small house, which he touched incessantly. It was a tick, a nervous, compulsive gesture. Every 30 seconds, his thick fingers would brush the cold metal, rotating the bezel, checking the time, tapping the face. He wasn't eating, he was drinking, and he was watching his phone with the intensity of a bomb disposal expert waiting for a timer to hit 0. "Excuse me," Richard barked, not looking up from the glowing screen. His voice was a gravelly baritone that cut through the ambient jazz like a serrated knife. "I've been waiting for a refill for 4 minutes. Do I need to send a search party, or are you just incompetent?" Sophia froze. She was currently serving table 6, a nice elderly couple celebrating an anniversary. She pivoted, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll be right there with the bottle. Don't tell me." "Show me," Richard snapped, finally looking up. His face was flushed, a map of broken capillaries across his nose and cheeks, signaling high blood pressure and higher stress. But his eyes, his eyes were darting. They weren't fixed on Sophia with genuine anger. They were scanning the room, looking at the door, looking at the window, looking back at his phone. He was a trapped animal masquerading as a lion. 3 tables away, in the shadow of a large potted fern, Dr. Arthur Vance sliced a piece of salmon with surgical precision. He didn't look up. He didn't need to. He was listening to the cadence of Richard's breathing, which was shallow and rapid thoracic breathing, the kind that happens when the body is in a fight or flight state. Arthur took a sip of his sparkling water and shifted his gaze slightly, catching Richard's reflection in the darkened window pane. Arthur Vance was a man who lived in the details that other people ignored. To the casual observer, he was just a well-dressed man in his 50s, perhaps a professor or a retired surgeon, with graying temples and eyes that were unsettlingly still. But Arthur was a mentalist, a scholar of human behavior who had spent 30 years deconstructing the architecture of lies. He didn't read minds. He read muscles. He read the involuntary contraction of the zygomaticus major, the dilation of pupils, the micro-tremors in a hand holding a fork. He watched Richard touch the watch again. Self-soothing behavior, Arthur noted internally. The pacifier effect. He touches the gold because it anchors him to his identity of wealth. He's afraid, terrified. But of what? Sophia approached table 4, the bottle of Cabernet cradled in a white napkin. Her hands were shaking, just a fraction. The stress of the night, the exhaustion, the sheer malice radiating from this man was seeping into her bones. "I apologize for the wait, Mr. Castellano," Sophia said softly, reaching out to pour. "Whatever," Richard grunted, his eyes snapping back to his phone as a notification pinged. He read it, and his face went from red to a sickly, pale grey in a nanosecond. His hand jerked, a violent, involuntary spasm. It happened in slow motion. Richard's elbow flared out just as Sophia tilted the bottle. His arm collided with her wrist. The bottle slipped. It didn't shatter. It was worse. The dark, blood-red wine cascaded out of the bottle, splashing heavily onto the pristine white tablecloth, splashing onto the breadbasket, and sending a spray of crimson droplets across the sleeve of Richard's $3,000 suit. The restaurant went silent. The jazz seemed to stop. The wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Sophia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, sir, I am so sorry, Richard stood up. The chair scraped against the floor with a sound like a gunshot. "You stupid cow," he roared. The vein in his neck bulged, throbbing against his collar. "Look what you did. Are you blind? Are you stupid, or just blind? You moved your arm, sir, I didn't," Sophia stammered, tears instantly welling in her eyes, hot and stinging. She grabbed a napkin, trying to dab at his sleeve, an instinctive, futile gesture. He swatted her hand away violently. "Don't touch me. You'll probably ruin the fabric even more with your filthy hands." He wasn't just angry. He was unleashing a torrent of misplaced rage. It was a displacement mechanism. Arthur watched from his table, his eyes narrowing. Richard wasn't screaming at the waitress because of the wine. He was screaming because the text message he had just received had destroyed his life. The wine was just the trigger, the excuse to vomit his terror onto someone weaker than him. "Manager," Richard bellowed, turning to the room, his arms spread wide, playing to the audience. "Where is the incompetence that runs this place?" The manager, a thin, nervous man named David, scurried over, looking like a rabbit caught between a fox and a wolf. "Mr. Castellano, please. What happened? Is everything all right? Does this look all right to you?" Richard pointed a trembling finger at the stain on his cuff. "This incompetent girl just ruined a bespoke suit. She's clumsy, she's slow, and frankly, she smells like poverty. I want her fired. Now, get her out of my sight." Sophia stood there, shrinking. She felt small, smaller than she had ever felt in her life. The humiliation was a physical weight, crushing her chest, making it hard to breathe. She thought of Lily. She thought of the inhaler that cost $200. She thought of the rent due on Tuesday. She couldn't lose this job. She swallowed her pride, swallowed the bile rising in her throat. "Sir, please," Sophia whispered, her voice cracking. "I'll pay for the cleaning. Please don't. I need this job." "You should have thought about that before you decided to be an idiot," Richard sneered, leaning in close to her face. "People like you, ... You're interchangeable. You're nothing. You exist to serve people like me, and you can't even do that right. Go back to the kitchen where you belong. Or better yet, go back to the gutter." The cruelty was absolute. It was unnecessary. It was evil. And it was in that moment, as Sophia looked down at her cheap black shoes, tears dripping onto the floor, that Arthur Vance felt a familiar coldness settle in his stomach. It was the coldness of clarity. He observed the room. The other diners looked away, studying their salads, checking their own phones. The bystander effect in full swing. Everyone felt uncomfortable, but no one wanted to intervene. No one wanted to attract the predator's attention. They were relieved it wasn't them. "This is the nature of power," Arthur thought, placing his napkin on the table. Or rather, the illusion of it. True power is control over oneself. This man has none. Arthur saw the micro-expressions flashing across Richard's face as he watched Sophia cry. There was a flicker of ... satisfaction. No, relief. For a brief second, Richard felt better because he had made someone else feel worse than he did. It was a narcotic hit of dominance to soothe his own impotence. And speaking of feeling small, if you have ever stood in a room where you felt invisible, where your voice didn't matter, or where someone with a loud voice tried to erase your dignity, you know exactly how Sophia feels right now. It's a universal pain. If you believe that dignity is a right, not a privilege, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like this video. It helps us share these stories of truth and justice with the world. Now, let's see what happens when the predator realizes he's not the only hunter in the room. Arthur stood up. He didn't rush. He buttoned his jacket slowly. He checked the knot of his tie. Every movement was deliberate, calibrated to project absolute calm. In the animal kingdom, the predator doesn't run around barking. The predator moves with silence and economy. He walked across the carpeted floor, his footsteps soundless. "David," Arthur said, his voice low, but carrying a resonance that cut through Richard's shouting. The manager looked up, relieved to see a familiar face, but terrified of the conflict. "Dr. Vance, I'm handling this." "I don't think you are," Arthur said gently. He turned his gaze to Richard. Richard spun around, ready to attack this new intruder. "Who the hell are you?" "Another incompetent employee." Arthur smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile a doctor gives when he has a diagnosis that is going to hurt. "No, I'm just a patron who is trying to enjoy his salmon. But I couldn't help but notice that you seem to be having a very difficult day, Richard." Richard blinked. The use of his first name disarmed him for a split second. "I don't know you. Get lost." "We don't know each other," Arthur agreed, stepping closer, invading Richard's personal space, just enough to be uncomfortable, but not enough to be aggressive. "But I know about you. Or rather, I know what your body is screaming while your mouth is busy shouting at this young woman." "Excuse me." Richard stepped back, clutching his phone tighter. "The watch," Arthur said, gesturing vaguely to Richard's wrist. "You've touched it 19 times in the last 12 minutes. It's a Patek Philippe Nautilus, isn't it? Beautiful. But you're not touching it to admire it. You're touching it to make sure it's still there. It's a pacifying behavior. We do it when we feel our security is threatened." "You're crazy," Richard scoffed, but he stopped touching the watch. He crossed his arms, a defensive barrier. "And the phone," Arthur continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You're checking it every 30 seconds, but you're not reading emails. You're waiting for a specific message. Your pupils are dilated, Richard, even in this bright light. That's fear, adrenaline. You're in a state of high alert." "I'm a CEO," Richard spat, puffing out his chest. "I'm a busy man. I have important deals happening." "No." Arthur shook his head slowly. "Busy men look annoyed. You look terrified. There's a difference in the tension of the jaw. When we are annoyed, we clench the masseter muscle. When we are terrified, we tighten the platysma, the muscle here in the neck." Arthur pointed to his own neck. "Yours has been rigid since you walked in." Sophia had stopped crying. She was staring at Arthur, mesmerized. The manager, David, was frozen. "Listen, pal," Richard growled, stepping forward, trying to use his size to intimidate. "I don't need a lecture from some wannabe shrink. This girl ruined my suit and I want her gone." "She didn't ruin your suit, Richard," Arthur said calmly. "You jerked your arm. I saw it. I saw the spasm. It happened exactly when your phone vibrated, a haptic notification. Who was it? Your wife? Or your partner?" Richard's face went white. The color drained out of him so fast, it was as if someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Arthur pressed on. He had found the crack in the armor. Now he had to pry it open. You see, Richard, humans are terrible at hiding their true emotions. We leak the truth. The way you're standing right now, feet pointing towards the door. You want to run. You're desperate to leave this room, but you can't, because running would look like guilt. So you stayed, and you created a scene to discharge the energy. You needed to be the powerful one for just 5 minutes, because out there, Arthur pointed to the window, to the swirling snow. Out there, you've lost control, haven't you? You don't know what you're talking about, Richard whispered, but the venom was gone. His voice was trembling. Don't I? Arthur took a step closer. He could smell the sour sweat on Richard now. The sweat on your upper lip. It's cold in here, Richard. Why are you sweating? It's the vagus nerve reacting to extreme stress. The kind of stress that comes when a house of cards is about to fall. Arthur glanced at Sophia. David, he said to the manager, never taking his eyes off Richard. Sophia didn't spill the wine. This man knocked it out of her hand. If you fire her, you'll be firing the only innocent person in this equation. And I will personally ensure that every one of my clients, who make up about 40% of your revenue, is exactly why they shouldn't die in here anymore. David swallowed hard. I see. Sophia, go to the break room. Get cleaned up. You're not fired. Sophia let out a sob of relief, clutching her tray. She looked at Arthur with eyes wide with gratitude and confusion. Thank you, she mouthed. Go, Arthur said gently. When she was gone, Arthur turned his full attention back to Richard. The dynamic had shifted completely. The bully was now the prey. Now, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a register that was almost infrasound, deep and vibrating. Why don't you sit down, Richard? You look like you're about to faint. And we need to talk about what's really on that phone. Richard looked at the door. He looked at Arthur. He looked at the stained tablecloth that resembled a crime scene. He slumped into his chair, the fight leaving him like air from a punctured tire. Who are you? Richard asked, his voice barely audible. I'm just someone who pays attention, Arthur replied, sitting opposite him, ignoring the wine stain. And right now, I'm the only person in this room who knows that you're about 48 hours away from losing everything. The question is, do you want to control the fall, or do you want to crash? The wind outside howled louder, rattling the glass, but the silence at table 4 was heavier than the storm. Arthur leaned in. He saw the micro-expression of resignation, the slight drooping of the eyelids, the surrender. Tell me about the construction site in Lodu, Richard, Arthur said. It was a guess, but an educated one. He had seen the logo on Richard's cufflinks, earlier Castellano construction, and he knew that in Denver, the big money and the big corruption was in the lower downtown redevelopment. Richard's eyes widened in shock. How? I told you, Arthur said. You leak the truth. Arthur watched Richard Castellano crumble. It wasn't a physical collapse, but a psychological implosion. The man who had been a titan of industry 5 minutes ago, barking orders and humiliating a waitress, was now a heap of expensive fabric and raw terror. He stared at Arthur with the wide, glassy eyes of a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming semi-truck. The Lodu site, double quotes, Richard whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. How could you possibly know about Lodu? Arthur didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch, let it become a physical weight on Richard's chest. Silence is a mentalist's most potent weapon. In the absence of sound, the guilty mind fills the void with its own fears. Arthur picked up his glass of water, took a slow, deliberate sip, and placed it back down, aligning it perfectly with the edge of the table. I didn't know, Arthur said softly. Not for certain, until you just confirmed it. Richard flinched. He had been tricked. A classic cold reading technique. Arthur had thrown out a high-probability beta construction CEO in Denver facing a crisis. It almost always involved the biggest project in the city. and Richard had bitten down on the hook with desperate force. You tricked me," Richard stammered, anger trying to ignite but failing, dampened by the wet blanket of his fear. "I observed," Arthur corrected, "and you confirmed. But let's not get bogged down in semantics. Let's talk about the text message, the one that made your hand spasm, the one that made you knock the wine out of Sophia's hand because you needed to hit something, anything, to stop yourself from screaming." Richard looked down at his phone, which lay on the table like a loaded gun. The screen was dark now, but the threat remained. "My partner," Richard admitted, his voice hollow. He found the invoices. The duplicate invoices for the steel. "We used grade B steel for the support beams. We charge for grade A. The difference. It's millions of dollars. And the safety inspections?" Arthur asked, his eyes boring into Richard's. "You paid them off?" Richard nodded, a jerky, mechanical movement. "The inspector, he has a gambling debt. It was easy. It was supposed to be easy. But then the cracks appeared. Literally. In the foundation of Tower 3, my partner sent an independent engineer to there. That was the text. The report came back. The concrete is compromised. The whole thing. It's a death trap." Arthur felt a chill that had nothing to do with the blizzard outside. This wasn't just financial fraud. This was potential manslaughter on a massive scale. "If that tower fell, he's going to the FBI," Richard whispered, tears leaking from his eyes now, mixing with the sweat on his face. "He gave me 48 hours to turn myself in, or he does it for me. I'm finished. My life is over. I have a wife, kids in private school, a reputation." "Reputation," Arthur repeated the word, tasting its irony. "You were worried about your reputation when you were screaming at a single mother who makes minimum wage. You were worried about your reputation when you called her filthy." Richard looked down, shame finally piercing through his narcissism. I was scared. I didn't mean it. I felt so powerless. And that gives you the right to take power from someone else." Arthur's voice was hard now, devoid of sympathy. "That is the logic of a bully, Richard. And bullies are always, invariably, cowards." Arthur leaned back. The restaurant was beginning to return to normal. The jazz had started up again. People were eating. The world was moving on, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding at table 4. "So, here is your reality," Arthur said, outlining the options with clinical detachment. "Option A, you run. You try to liquidate assets, maybe catch a flight to a non-extradition country, but you won't make it. Your partner is watching you. The FBI is probably already monitoring your accounts if your partner is smart. You'll be caught at the airport, in front of everyone, handcuffed, dragged away. It will be on the evening news. Your wife will see it. Your children will see it." Richard shuddered, burying his face in his hands. "Option B," Arthur continued. "You wait. You let the 48 hours run out. You hope for a miracle that isn't coming. The FBI kicks down your door at 4 a.m. They toss your house. They traumatize your family. You go to prison for 20 years. Minimum. Is there ... Is there an option C?" Richard asked, looking up, a desperate plea in his eyes. He was looking for a savior. He was looking for the very thing he had denied Sophia. "Mercy." "There is," Arthur said, "but it requires something you haven't shown much of tonight. Courage. And humility." Arthur leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You'll go to the FBI yourself, tonight, right now. You don't wait for the 48 hours. You walk into the federal building, you ask for the agent in charge of white-collar crime, and you lay it all out. You bring the invoices. You bring the bribe records. You confess. You tell them everything before they have to find it." "Why would I do that?" Richard asked, bewildered. "Because cooperation counts," Arthur explained. "Because if you bring them the case wrapped in a bow, if you testify against the inspector, against anyone else involved, you control the narrative. You show remorse. Judges like remorse. Juries like remorse. You'll still go to prison, Richard. Make no mistake. But instead of 20 years, maybe it's 5. Maybe it's a minimum security facility. Maybe you get to see your children graduate. Richard stared at the tablecloth, at the red stain that looked like blood. He was weighing his life. The gold watch on his wrist suddenly looked heavy, like a shackle. And Sophia, Arthur added. You're going to fix that too. What? Richard looked confused. You humiliated her publicly. You damaged her professional reputation. You caused her emotional distress. Before you leave this table, you are going to write a check, a personal check, not from the company account, from your personal funds, for $10,000. $10,000? Richard balked. For spilling wine? No, Arthur said sharply. For the dignity you tried to steal, and consider it a cheap price. Because if you don't, I will make sure that when your story breaks, the headline isn't just CEO confesses to fraud. It will be CEO who endangered lives also abuses minimum wage workers. I'll make you the most hated man in America, and I have the contacts to do it. It was a bluff, mostly, but Richard didn't know that. Richard saw a man who had read his deepest secrets in the twitch of an eye muscle. He believed Arthur was capable of anything. Richard reached into his jacket pocket. His hand was trembling so badly he could barely hold his checkbook. He wrote the check. He tore it out. He placed it on the table. Good, Arthur said. Now go. The federal building is on 19th Street. Don't go home. Don't call your lawyer yet. Just go. Do the one decent thing you have left in you. Richard stood up. He looked smaller now. The suit hung on him. The arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind just a scared, flawed man. He looked at Arthur one last time, a mix of hatred and gratitude in his eyes. Who are you? He asked again. I'm just a customer, Arthur said, turning back to his cold salmon. Richard walked out into the blizzard. He didn't look back. Arthur signaled for David. The manager hurried over. Is he... Is he gone? David asked, nervous. He won't be coming back, Arthur said. He has an appointment with his conscience. David, could you please ask Sophia to come out? I have something for her. A moment later, Sophia emerged from the kitchen. Her eyes were red, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked exhausted, defeated. She approached the table wearily. Sir, she asked. Arthur picked up the check. He held it out to her. Mr. Castellano wanted you to have this, an apology for his behavior. Sophia took the slip of paper. She looked at the number. Her eyes went wide. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth again. 10,000. Is this real? It's real, Arthur said, and it's yours. For the tuition, or the rent, or for Lily. Sophia froze. She looked at Arthur, really looked at him. How do you know about Lily? Arthur smiled gently. You have a picture of her in your locket. I saw it when you leaned over to pour the wine. And you have a small sticker of a cartoon dinosaur on your name tag. My niece loves that show. It's popular with 4-year-olds. Sophia laughed. It was a wet, choked sound, but it was a laugh. She's 4. Yes, she has asthma. The medication is so expensive. Not anymore, Arthur said. Take the night off, Sophia. Go home to your daughter. Sophia looked at the check, then at Arthur. Tears streamed down her face again, but these were different tears. Tears of relief, tears of hope. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know who you are, but thank you. You're welcome, Arthur said. Drive safe in the snow. As Sophia walked away, clutching the check to her chest like a lifeline, Arthur watched her go. He felt a warmth that the expensive wine couldn't provide. Justice is a funny thing. Sometimes it comes from a judge's gavel. Sometimes it comes from a lightning bolt. And sometimes it comes from simply paying attention, from seeing the pain in someone's eyes and refusing to look away. The epilogue played out over the next few months like a slow-motion car crash for Richard and a sunrise for Sophia. Richard did go to the FBI that night. He confessed. The investigation was swift and brutal. The construction of Tower 3 was halted. The concrete was tested and found to be dangerously substandard. It would have collapsed within 5 years. Richard's confession saved lives. Hundreds of lives. Because he cooperated. Because he wore a wire and caught the corrupt inspector and his own partner on tape, the judge showed leniency. He got 6 years in a minimum security federal camp. He lost his fortune, his reputation, and his friends, but he kept his family. His wife surprisingly stood by him, humbled by his sudden, desperate honesty. In prison, Richard works in the library. He doesn't wear a watch anymore. He doesn't need to know the time every 30 seconds. He has learned to breathe. He has learned that power isn't about gold watches or shouting at waiters. It's about being able to look at yourself in the mirror without flinching. And Sophia, the $10,000 was a seed. She paid off her debts. She bought Lily the best nebulizer on the market. But more importantly, she bought herself time to study. She enrolled in community college, taking business administration classes at night. 2 years later, Arthur was walking through the financial district of Denver. The sun was shining, the air crisp and clean. He passed a small, bustling cafe. The sign above the door read, "Lily's." He stopped. Through the window, he saw her, Sophia. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She was wearing a blazer. She was directing staff, laughing with a customer, holding a clipboard. She looked confident. She looked happy. She looked like someone who owned her own destiny. She didn't see him. Arthur didn't go in. He didn't need the recognition. The outcome was the reward. He adjusted his coat, smiled to himself, and walked on, disappearing into the crowd of the city. A ghost in the machine. A guardian in a tailored suit. Life is full of Richards and Sophias. We all have moments where we feel powerful and moments where we feel powerless. The true test of character is in how we act when we are winning. It's how we treat the people who can do absolutely nothing for us. It's about noticing the invisible pain of others. It's about realizing that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. So be kind, always. If this story touched something in you, if you believe in the power of second chances and the importance of standing up for the vulnerable, please leave a comment below telling us about a time someone stood up for you. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the hidden depths of the human experience. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that even in the darkest winter night, there is always a dawn waiting to break. Thank you for watching.